We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Wednesday, May 20th here in Seoul. I'm Isujin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Kyun.
Thank you for having me.
Coming in, also Niall's with us today.
Good morning.
And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So South Korea's free subway rides for senior citizens have long been seen as a sign of respect for the older generations. But as the country ages faster than almost anywhere else in the world, many are questioning whether the system remains financially sustainable. But before we get into that debate, Kyun, how does South Korea's free subway policy for seniors work today?
Under the current law, citizens aged 65 and over are allowed to use urban railway transit systems for free, regardless of the place of residence, level of income, or even travel time. However, as South Korea's population continues to age, becoming a super age society in late 2024, problems have surfaced due to massive losses from free subway rides across the nation's 6 urban rail systems. Now, in fact, losses reached a record high last year, totaling around 770 billion won. And in response, President Lee Jae-myung in a cabinet meeting suggested restricting the use of senior free rides during peak hours and asked his officials to look over it by separating those who are actually going to work and those who aren't, which sparked a big debate on the reform of the social policy that is over almost 40 years old.
So what began as a welfare benefit is now raising broader questions about fairness, cost, and practicality. And that has led policymakers to consider several ways to preserve the benefit while easing the burden on their transit system. So what are some ways officials could possibly limit free rides for seniors, Niall?
Right, so one option is to raise the age threshold for seniors, and the second one, as the president suggested, is actually limiting free rides during peak commuting hours only. Another one that's been suggested is charging different fares depending on the income level of each senior.
So each option involves trade-offs, balancing fiscal realities with support for older citizens. And because this benefit has long been viewed as a symbol of respect for the elderly, any reform is likely to spark some strong public reaction. And that's why we're going to talk more about this. But first, let's take a look at the screen. The subway is one of the most popular ways to get around Seoul. Even people who own cars often prefer taking the train, especially in a city known for heavy traffic and limited parking. But as South Korea's population ages rapidly, a benefit once introduced to support older citizens is coming under increasing pressure. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at whether the qualifying age for free subway rides should be raised, whether free rides should be restricted during rush hour, and whether fares should be adjusted based on income. As we just saw in a video, free subway rides for senior citizens have become a growing source of debate as costs continue to rise. And opinions are likely divided on how the system should be reformed, if at all. So let's find out where our panelists stand on this. So, should the age for free subway rides be raised, Niall?
Yeah, as we mentioned, this is a very touchy subject in which I will play the devil's advocate. I think the current age standard should be raised to reflect modern times. When the free subway ride system was introduced back in 1984, people aged 65 and older made up only 4% of the population. Last year, that figure rose to 21%, which is a 5-fold increase. Korea is heading towards a very super age society, so continuing the same benefit may worsen deficits. Massive losses are reportedly leading to delayed investments, which can threaten public safety. They are related. In Seoul, aging subway facilities are said to be a serious issue.
So the fiscal aspect of it might be not as practical to continue what some might see as a bit outdated. So what are your thoughts on this?
To counter what Niall just said, under the current law, the threshold for being classified as an elderly or senior is set at 65. So in reality, many people actually retire before reaching that age, around 60. And a large number of seniors, that is age 65 and older, either have no stable source of income or rely on low-paying, unstable jobs such as public work programs. Now, raising the eligibility age to 70 would inevitably place an additional burden on older adults in that age group. This is especially concerning given that South Korea has one of the highest elderly poverty rates among developed countries.
Right, so this comes down to a difficult act of balancing fiscal sustainability and protecting vulnerable seniors. And another idea being discussed is limiting the benefit to only during the busiest parts of the day. So what do you think about free rides being restricted during rush hour then, Niall?
Yes, this is the one that has been discussed with the president as well. During peak commuting hours, subway trains can become dangerously crowded, whether with seniors or not. In busy transfer stations, there's also a greater risk of accidents as well. And restricting free rides during those hours could reduce the crowding as well as make some benefits financially. This argument suggested seniors traveling for work purposes may have enough financial means to pay for the fares.
That makes sense. I'm guessing people are most triggered during work hours anyway. So what are your thoughts on this?
You know, this question can be easily answered just by looking at how many free riders take subways during rush hour.
True.
Seniors account for roughly 8% of total passengers, which is about 19 people per train car at most. Now, even if those passengers were removed, it would not significantly ease congestion levels and crowding. Other measures such as increasing train frequency or encouraging remote work should be considered instead. Furthermore, the Korean Senior Citizens Association has already advised elderly citizens to avoid using public transportation during commuting hours whenever possible. And so far, there have not been any cases reported of seniors becoming a source of delay, discomfort, or even crowding during peak hours.
So then that raises the question of whether such a change would meaningfully reduce crowding. And some say a more targeted approach would be to preserve the benefit for perhaps lower income seniors. So then what do you think about free rides being based on the seniors' income then, Niall?
I do think this is a reasonable approach, and other countries such as the United States and France already started implementing these different benefits depending on the senior's income level or age. According to the Korea Transport Institute, limiting benefits to the bottom 70% income group could reduce free ride losses by 72% by 2030 compared to the current system.
Okay, what are your thoughts on this?
I would like to slightly disagree again. The problem is that determining seniors' income levels would require enormous administrative resources and even budget spending. There would also likely be significant complaints over the fairness regarding asset and income criteria. Now, this is the most important part. We need to consider why this policy was put into place in the first place, stepping aside from economic losses. Now, the purpose was to help prevent social isolation and deteriorating health among older adults, and to encourage them to become more active by, moving around, meeting their peers, and enjoying their retired life a little more by, just reducing the burden of actually paying a small amount of transportation fee.
Right. So now that we're actually talking about the pros and cons, it's clear that each proposal has clear advantages and drawbacks, and there's no easy solution to this. So ultimately, the challenge will be finding a policy that is both financially sustainable and also fair to all older citizens. So to get a personal perspective on this debate, we're going to talk to a senior citizen, and that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out Channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Sarah, who is directly also affected by the free subway policy. So hello, thank you so much for connecting with us today.
No, thank you for asking me.
Right, so Sarah, how often do you personally take advantage of the free subway benefit, and when do you typically use a subway?
I do drive in Seoul, but probably 80% of the time I take public transportation. I don't like crowds, so I very rarely would go during the peak rush hour times. But otherwise, almost every day, I'm out on public transportation.
That's good to hear, Sarah. How do you think the free subway ride policy can be reformed, and how does Korea's free subway benefit compare with the support for seniors in the US?
In the US, I think one of the differences is our federal government doesn't control the policies. It's by state or county or city. So it's not the same everywhere. And most places, or many places, we don't even have good public transportation like Korea. Korea has amazing public transportation. But our system more often is 50-50, 50% off on a bus as well as 50% off on a subway. And that seems to work well. It's free for other groups, veterans, handicapped people often have totally free public transportation service. So that would be one of the differences. Also in the States, our benefits extend to tourists as well. In Korea, only citizens and permanent residents get that benefit. But in the States, it's also available for tourists. All you have to have is a passport to prove your age. And as you mentioned earlier, I think the issue in Korea especially is because the retirement age is so early. People are on fixed incomes, and not only are they forced to or encouraged to retire what I would call early at age 60, whereas in the States we don't have mandatory retirement ages, that salaries often are reduced as you approach retirement age. So that fixed income gets really shrunken, and I think it really is difficult for a lot of people if they had to pay for their transportation.
Thank you so much for that insight. The last question we have for you today is, what do other seniors that you personally know think about this issue?
Well, I asked several people, and some were quite strong in their opinions, and they said, we've paid taxes all our lives, we've paid taxes for 40 years, and we ought to get some benefits now. Many said they would support a 50-50 rate like we have in the US, 50% on all public transportation, not just on the subways. And I think, as you mentioned, traveling during less crowded times would also work. But I think 100% of the people that I talked to said, we need that, or we want that benefit to continue.
Right, and I can see why, honestly. Right, so thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We just heard from a senior citizen about how often she uses the free subway benefit, what she typically uses it for, and how she believes the policy could be reformed, and what other seniors around her think about this issue. So it is a debate that affects a significant number of people and highlights the challenge of balancing support for older citizens with financial sustainability. So we also wanted to hear directly from our viewers. So we ran a poll on the Added News YouTube channel asking, should free subway rides for seniors be restricted? And here's what the results showed. So a majority, 74%, said the benefit should be maintained as it is, while 26% said some form of restriction is needed. So the results suggest that despite growing concerns over costs and also congestion, many people still see free subway rides as an important form of support for older citizens. So Kyun, what was your biggest takeaway then from today's discussion? We talked about different views and different, solutions that could come out of this.
A lot of things, but I think there is there's a huge gap and clashing ideas among different generations, which is the case for not just Korea, but I guess all across the world. And there is no one-size-fits-all solution that can satisfy each and every party. And it's really difficult to look at the past and the future when we're living in such a busy present life and we're so tied to all these things that are happening right now. It's hard to look forward, even in our futures as well, and the past of the older generations. However, we need to take into account the significant portion of free rides take up from the total deficits of railway transit systems because it can directly relate to the safety of all passengers. Niall just mentioned this in the beginning of the program. Having insufficient funds can delay upgrading old subways, and right now in the Seoul metropolitan subways, there are many old subways that need to be fixed. And also restoring facilities may take much longer, which in turn can cause many safety problems for all the passengers, including the seniors who get free rides. Now, looking at ways of sustaining the overall public transport system seems like the more important thing to look at in the long run for the convenience of all passengers, regardless of age. And just like what Sarah mentioned, perhaps giving 50% discount to all the seniors like they do in the States.
I thought that was a really good idea
that could really
too,
help because, I mean, for people, like the people who actually pay the full fare, looking at seniors and thinking, hey, they pay nothing at all. They get free rides and they take up all the seats, for example. And like especially during commuting hours, it gets really crowded. So I fully understand where the other side are coming from, thinking, they're taking advantage of all of us. We don't have a very bright future either. But then for seniors as well, I mean, they're saying, hey, we've paid tax all our lives. This is just a small benefit they're receiving from this country.
Right.
Are we asking for too much? But right now, if you look at the demographics, yes, looking at numbers, how much losses, deficits, this is all going into, we need to consider, maybe, I love that advice of giving just 50% discounts and even more to the lower income bracket perhaps. But just the fact that they get to use all subways for free gives up a different kind of connotation, So I think giving discounts could be perhaps a better option moving forward for Korea.
Right, and I thought what's great about that idea is that you're not taking the benefit away from a certain group of people by doing that. So I thought that was a good idea. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think the key word for today is actually looking at it from a community perspective and how long we can sustain this for. And we mentioned the aging society, and in certain regions in Korea now the age for young adults have also been lifted, I think as far up as 45, and we've covered that on News Gen before as well. People are living healthily up to even 100. They call it the 100 years era, and I think raising the threshold is something that we may have to accept in the future. When it comes to when we will do that is bringing up whole new different debates, but this would apply to our generation as well. I am not trying to exclude any age group in the current state, but younger generations that will come in the future, for example, children of millennials and Gen Z, will have to pay even a bigger sum of money to cover for this. So yes, I agree to this in a way that applies to all of us, including myself, and the population decline, other changes, the millennial and Gen Z generation does have to take this on in a financial way for the future. And we are trying our best to contribute to society, whether it be with taxes, national pensions, and even with the subway system. So even if it does affect our lives, perhaps, as Kyun mentioned, looking at it differently from different earning groups, that would be necessary. But this change overall is inevitable.
Right, so South Korea's free subway policy for seniors reflects a broader challenge facing an aging society, how to support older citizens while keeping public services financially sustainable. So whether the solution is raising the eligibility age or introducing income-based benefits, any reform will require difficult trade-offs. So whatever changes are made, the debate highlights the importance of finding a balance between fiscal responsibility and also respect for the elderly. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Kyun.
It's always a pleasure.
And also Niall.
Good to be here.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for watching. And hopefully your next subway ride has enough seats to go around for everyone without having to debate who deserves it more. We are News Generation.